Good evening, everybody. It's Kentario, and I'm back again with Christ and comic books. So today I was kind of wanting to do, going back into the Death Note series. I just finished up Volume 2. I already started getting into Volume 3, so just be prepared for Part 1 of Volume 3 to go ahead and get put out there. But the time's coming. I'm putting in that work to get the books read. So to continue where I left off from the middle part of Volume 2, we got L being introduced, which is very important because L rarely, if not ever, reveals his identity to people for the sake of, no one ever figuring out who he is. He can continue his work and he'll get the upper hand against, of course, the criminal that he's searching for. However, he's taken it to take it seriously that the opponent that they're dealing with is a very tough opponent. But not only that, the cost is getting higher to where now I need to be putting myself on the line, not just the people that are out there getting themselves killed. However, that doesn't mean that L's going to not be cautious, because he still is cautious. For instance, he set the expectation that they would need to make sure that in the midst of coming to meet him at the hotels, that their phones are being turned off. They're not bringing any other extra stuff with them. They're not telling anyone where they're going. Along with, he's not going to be staying in that same hotel for more than, I think it's 3 days. And then he's going to be switching to other hotels. So he's taking very extreme precautionary measures to make sure Kira doesn't figure out who he is, so that he can ensure that this case gets solved. So this leads into L sitting down with them and talking with them. Now, one thing I want to focus on, because if you recall, I think it was in the last video, if not the one before, that I referenced how L is very much a Christ-like figure in the way that they are carrying him, in the way that they are putting him out there. It's very interesting how they're doing that, making him seem like a Christ-like figure in this case. And I think that's the way that they parallel that between L and Light. I want to get into at another time. I'll probably get in actually at the very end of this video. That will we cover each instance as the time goes on. So in this instance, the way he's very Christ-like, like I was saying before, after so long in the Bible, the Israelites having to go through without actually having Christ there, without actually having a guarantee of salvation, but they needed Christ to come and be that one, to be the perfect sacrifice so they could have salvation. But he couldn't do that from sitting in heaven. He had to come down in the likeness of man, in the likeness of sinful flesh, as the word says. And so L also couldn't solve this case by staying in hiding. He had to come out of hiding for this case to truly be solved. He needed to put himself out there. So that gives that Christ-like imagery. So that continues on in this, with him being illustrated, one, as a very young man. He has very sleepy droopy eyes. He has very long, wild, not well maintained hair from the way that he was illustrated. And he's wearing a plain long sleeve white shirt along with some blue jeans, and in this case, no shoes. So he's illustrated in this kind of likeness. So it makes you take a step back and say, well, is he really who he says he is? Which is something that's very biblically relatable, because people saw the same with Jesus Christ, where the Israelites was expecting the Christ to come and rule and take down those in power and become the ruling power, so that the children of Israel could live and flourish. But that's not the image in which Christ came. He came in the image, as a lot of people say, as a poor man. But that's not to discredit, what Christ demonstrated himself to be capable of, which is what you see with L. L demonstrates his intellect, because after going through and talking with everybody, doing the introductions, he sets the ground rules. For instance, call him Ryuzaki, don't call him L, for the sake of there being any listening devices, any people around that might be trying to figure out who he really is. That reduces that narrowing of, okay, that might be L. Now let me get his name, let me get his face, let me kill him off. So that reduces him from being figured out from Kira. So after going through all the security measures that was necessary, even making sure that all of their phones are off, they had a good funny moment, because it was just like, making sure, oh yeah, that's a good idea, because we don't want the phones to be tapped or anything like that. Elle was like, no, I just don't want no one's phone going off while I'm talking. So it's kind of a funny moment. So they're sitting down and they're discussing things around the case, and as Elle begins to speak, L demonstrates a high level of comprehension of the situation. He demonstrates a high level of understanding of, what Kira is capable of. He understands the mind of Kira. So he points out all of these specific details that sparks some astonishment and interest in his fellow colleagues in this case. And that's to where it leads to where they're just like, wow, this is the L that we've heard so much about. So that's bringing about this confirmation for them that he is who he says he is. So this, again, that's that biblical reference that I think is so important when we're reading these stories. So as we press on here, we shift to Light in this instance. Of course, Light doing as he does, writing everything that, killing off the people that he's killing off, even making sure that he's writing preemptive deaths in place, just making sure in case he is being followed that no one can figure out the timeline with him. So he's taking those preemptive measures. Granted, he does know that L is aware that he can do that on a time span. So that's something that's also key there too, is that Light isn't just doing the killings randomly. Light isn't just making sure he's not being spied on, but he's keeping in mind what the opponent that he's contending with may be able to figure out of him as well in the midst of making these decisions. So that's something very key. So this portion of the story kind of leads into going with Light coming downstairs. He sees his mom. His mom's trying to get Dad's clothes sent up to the office because Dad hasn't been home because he needs a change of clothes. The daughter didn't want to do it. Light took up the responsibility. So Light's going off to the NPA to go drop off these clothes, the main office for the detectives. And so as he gets there, there's a young lady there looking to speak with the detectives over the Kira case. Now, of course, with Light being there, who is Kira, this sparks his interest to be like, I need to see what's going on here so I can stay ahead of it, basically. So he gets into the conversation with this young woman. Come to find out, for us as the viewers, this is Ray Penber's fiance. Of course, Ray Penber is the one of the 12 agents that died at the hands of Kira in the witch that we spoke about in the prior video. So with the wife now showing up, this is something of concern for Kira. Now, Kira doesn't know who she is yet. Kira hasn't figured that out. However, he knows that I need to get what information she has before they do. Now, in this instance, you find where Light is making his character evident to them, in the sense of he's speaking with the detectives at the security desk. He's letting them know who he is. They're like, wow, it's been so long since we've seen you, Light. Light plays it off casually, like, oh, I don't even know who you are. But then he goes into conversation with Ray Penber's wife. And so they're talking there, and in the midst of them talking, Light is making sure that she knows, who he is, knows that he's the son of the head of the NPA detective over this case, and then as well as, he's worked on some cases. So he kind of makes himself known to her. This is a way to build trust, because in this current moment, she hasn't revealed any of what information she might have. So he knows, let me build trust with her, let me get her name, and then I'm going to kill her off. Just to simplify this whole scenario, he's going through, talking with this woman to figure out how he can kill her off. So they go outside, he's making sure that their backs are to the cameras so that no one is able to see his face and see that he is speaking with this particular woman, if in case she's identified or what she came over for is being forwarded. So he makes sure he's not able to be identified. So then they continue to walk. She gives him a name, and in the midst of them, going and walking, he's building up trust even more by saying, hey, I know you can't contact my dad right now, but I can try calling my dad. He tries calling him, goes to voicemail. This leads to him saying, hey, well, stick with me, and then I'll make sure that if he calls me back, that then you get to speak to him directly. So again, this one, building trust. Two, this is giving him time to, make sure that he gets her killed off in a proper manner. So he has the name. He goes to write the name down as he's writing information from what she's disclosed. In the midst of this happening, you see Ryuk there, of course. Light doesn't go anywhere without Ryuk. I want you guys to keep that in mind. It's not as though Ryuk goes off and wanders the rest of the world and then comes back to see what Light's doing. Ryuk sticks by Light and witnesses everything that Light's doing, questions everything that Light is doing, and demonstrates a high interest in what Light is doing. So as Light is writing down this woman's name that she gave him in the beginning, and as he's writing down how she's going to die, Ryuk is laughing, and Light's wondering why he's laughing, so he finishes. But in the midst of stopping, they in part go to part ways, but then Light doesn't see her do what he written down she was going to do, which is basically take her life and make sure that she's unidentifiable when she takes her life. But it doesn't work. So with that not working, Light starts to put together the pieces that, oh yeah, she was cautious in the beginning. Even more so, she's still being cautious because the name I just got isn't her real name. So now I have to figure out, in the midst of one, because she goes to make her way back to the NPA to wait for someone to possibly even show up. So Light continues to follow her. He realizes it's only 5 minutes from where they are at the time till they're back at the NPA. I need to figure out this woman's name before I lose track of her, before she gets away, before she tells anyone else anything that she may know. Let's pause here. one of the things to point out with what she knows, she figured out from what Ray Penber was researching, who he was following, that there is some connection between what took place when he was on the bus, in this case stalking Light, and that criminal that was on that bus being killed. Along with that, with the time frame in which he died, he believes that the person that Ray Penber was stalking is the person that could be Light. And I'm simplifying this very much so, one, because there's a lot of information to it, and I do recommend you guys read Death Note, but on top of that, to make it simple for you to understand, this is enough to make them narrow down their search to Light, and even more so, puts more eyes on him, which it makes it harder for him to continue to beat Kira without there being any interruption. Even more so, making it harder for him to figure out who L really is, who is the biggest opponent in this case when it comes to Light being able to do what he wants and taking out criminals, which is what he aims to do. So in this, he's using these 5 minutes to try and figure out who this woman is. So one of the other things to keep in mind too, as a sidebar with L brings in Watari. Now, prior, in the beginning of Volume 1, when you see Watari, his face is very much covered. He's wearing a trench coat with the sides pulled all the way up to where you can't see his face. The hat's all the way down. You can't see the top of his head. So you don't know what he looks like. You don't know his age. You don't know anything. We now get to see him, and he is a white-haired gentleman who still answers to L. And in the midst of this, you get to see his level of obedience, which kind of gives him an angelic perspective. To be totally honest, he makes him seem angelic in this case. But he's very obedient, and he's very timely. So he came back in time when the other detectives are there meeting with L. He was able to go ahead and put out the calls that were needed, as in making sure everything's taken care of at the NPAs and making sure things are taken care of with the government and with the FBI in the United States, being that they lost all of these agents. So his ability to communicate is very cool, very consistent and concise. And again, this really speaks to him being like an angelic figure, because angels are messengers. So he really plays this part very well. That's something to keep in mind. He kind of almost like Alfred from Batman. That's another thing that's really cool about Watari. So let's double back to Light, trying to make sure that he stays on top of this woman. What he tries doing in this instance is he goes to follow with her. She's wondering why he's still following with her, and he expresses, I thought you wanted to still wait for my father to contact me, but she kind of still pulls back a little bit more. So with that being the case, Light goes to the extent of expressing, hey, I'm in on the case. I'm actually a part of the detectives that are trying to figure out who Kira really is. And this kind of sparks an interest from her. And so in the midst of this sparking an interest from her, Light still fills in on that. And what Light does is he speaks to him actually having learned that she used to be an FBI agent who worked alongside L. So with that being the case, he digs into more of that FBI side of her of, you want to figure this out. You want to be able to help. You've demonstrated your capabilities. I appreciate that. I value that. So he hypes her up. And in hyping her up, he lets her know, he lets her know that, hey, I need to determine, basically who you really are. To simplify this, he expresses he needs to figure out her real name. And in this case, he finally gets her real name. And in getting her real name, he writes down again the same thing he wrote down before. And before she goes to do what she needs, what he's instructed her to do according to what he's written down. It's interesting how he did it, because he's looking at his watch. He's writing her actual name down, information from her driver's license, because he got that from her. And she's like, why are you always looking at your watch? And he says, because. And as the time hits the time that he set in writing her name down, he tells her, I'm Kira. And the effects of the Death Note kick in, and she goes to commit suicide, to the extent of making sure that her body is unidentifiable. What's key here to also double back to in the case of L, because there was no presence at the NPA Detective Agency after all the things that were discussed with L had taken place, it becomes identifiable in this instance that someone needs to be back at the office. So L designates someone to go back to the office. So one of the detectives goes back, and in the midst of him going back, he ends up walking by Light and the female detective, Ray Penber's fiance, in this same instance as them two were talking. So if he had been sent sooner, he might have been able to catch her. If Light hadn't stopped her, she might have been back at the NPA in time for him to see her, speak with her, and get that information. So this was a very timely, impactful move that's taken place in this. So now he's then killed off this important woman to this storyline. So that becomes such a deep thing to have taken place, that this woman's life has been lost. Now, this doesn't go without there being some identity taking place here as we go to draw this to a close. So it ends up that they figure out who she actually is. And I mean that from Elle's perspective. Elle figures out who she actually is because the mother of her calls, and in getting that message, because the detectives are back at the MPA, they got that call, they forward it to Elle. Elle remembers her. Elle is putting the pieces together of, hey, the fiance's here too. The fiance came with information. The fiance and the husband, Ray Penber, they are both dead now. So yes, we understand she could have been grieving, but that does not discount that it could have been Kira that took her out for information. So Elle does keep that in mind. Alongside with that, with the research that they were doing in the midst of her being killed off, they got footage of Ray Penber from when Kira was following him and got him to get the identity of the 12 agents delivered to Light so that Light could kill them off. But in the midst of Light getting that information while him and Ray Penber were on the subway, Light revealed himself to Ray Penber as Ray Penber was dying from the death note. So that is some key information that makes Elle interested in the footage, because now we can narrow down that it started with Ray Penber, the information on the 12 agents getting out. So now they can narrow this down more that, okay, it has to be the people that he was following. So this leads to Elle making the decision of, we need to put cameras in their home. We need to put cameras in the homes of the people that Ray Penber was watching. And that ended up including... I got a message, I'm sorry, it distracted me. That ended up including the family, the Yagami family. So that, of course, sparked some shock in the eyes of the other detectives that were there. It's like, how could you suspect our chief? You know, and that's what kind of concerns them, even after he's cleared himself. But that doesn't necessarily clear his family. But his response is, okay, go ahead, put the cameras, put the recorders in my home. I'll approve it. So he's doing this, although it's making him very anxious to have to make this decision. He knows this makes him uneasy, but at the same time, he wants to clear his family's name. He wants to clear his son, his daughter, his wife from being suspects. So he agrees to go with this. And you can see with the way that it's illustrated, that's one thing that's really cool about Takeshi Obata. He really does a great job of illustrating the emotion and the tension that's built in these scenes. And so the father is very, very tense. But cameras have been put in the house to try and figure out who Kira is. All right, guys, we're going to end this video right here. I know this one was pretty long, but thank you for sticking it out and watching this with me. I do hope you guys make sure that you hit the subscribe button, hit a like, but most of all, please leave your comments, because one, I want to see if I'm actually on track with what I've been saying, as well as I want to see if you can see what I'm talking about, if it makes sense. Thank you, guys. Please leave your feedback and have a blessed day.